September 28, 2002, 2:03 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Timberline Trail, Mount Hood National Forest, Oregon. Evan McAllister, 22, is hiking with a church-adjacent outdoor group. He is seen alive near the Sandy River Junction. Minutes later, he is gone. No call. No reply to his name. No clear sign on the ground. What happened to Evan on that trail? For years later, hikers will find something that changes the file and the debate. It will not end the case. It will sharpen the questions. One detail today will matter more than anyone realizes. The plan that morning was simple. A short educational stop at Zigzag Ranger Station. A low-risk loop with good visibility and water access. The leader logged the head count at 11:06 a.m. The roster listed 9 adults. Evan signed his name and emergency contact. He carried a small day pack, 1 liter of water, a nutrition bar, a foldable map, and a basic flip phone. At 12:41 p.m., the plan changed. The group decided to peel off toward the Timberline Trail and head for the Sandy River crossing. They did not file a route change at the ranger station. They did not call Evan's father, Daniel. The weather was fair for late September. Thin clouds. Air around 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Light wind out of the west. The trail here narrows along eroded edges. The grade tilts toward the riverbed. Cell coverage is inconsistent and often absent. Evan moved near the front for portions of the walk. He was fit and used to weekend hikes. Several members later said he took short leads, then waited. The group broke its pace into 2 clusters. A faster trio in front. The rest 10 to 20 yards back. It was ordinary spacing on a busy day. Hikers passed in both directions. At 1:52 p.m., Evan's phone recorded its last network handshake. The log shows a weak signal attempt. No call was placed. No text was sent. A camera in his pack later showed 3 mid-trail photos stamped between 1:24 and 1:37 p.m. Shadows are short. Angles match that segment of the Timberline corridor. Nothing odd in frame. Boots. Brush. A strip of sky. At approximately 2:05 p.m., 2 anglers on the Sandy River banks are a young man walking alone on the higher bench. Gray t-shirt. Dark trail runners. Blue trekking pants. He moved with purpose. He did not wave. He did not look upset. The anglers looked away to reset their lines. They did not keep him in sight. Within minutes, several in Evan's group heard a single sharp shout. It was short and high. No second sound followed. They paused. They called his name. The front trio assumed he had stepped ahead toward the river bend. The rear group slowed, then bunched. No one reported hearing rockfall. No one reported a splash. The river noise was moderate but not overwhelming. The ground told little. Dust over pumice and small stones held footprints poorly. A gust had pushed grit across the surface earlier. The switchback edges showed scuffing from daily use. A faint slide mark on one outer edge led nowhere clear. No torn fabric. No broken buckle. Nothing that pointed in a single direction. At 2:19 p.m., the leader called for a quick sweep. Pairs fanned out 50 yards on either side of the track. Whistles sounded and stopped. The group reformed after 10 minutes. The forward trio said they had not seen Evan at the bend. The rear group said he had been ahead of them seconds before the shout. The head count now read 8. The leader wrote the number in a pocket notebook. Time and location were noted. Minutes matter in this terrain. Light drops behind the ridge by late afternoon. Temperatures sink fast near the river channel. A missing hiker can move quickly if they choose the wrong spur. Or they can sit and wait, invisible behind brush for feet high. The group faced a choice. Hike out to reach coverage or keep searching blind. They kept searching for now. At 2:33 p.m., a volunteer with a handheld radio attempted a relay to a driver on Highway 26. No confirmation came back. A second attempt at 2:41 p.m. also failed. The group split again, this time on purpose. 2 went downslope toward the river trail. 2 hiked back toward a point where a phone sometimes catches a signal. The rest held at the bend and kept calling. Between 2:45 and 3:05 p.m., hikers not tied to the group passed through. None reported seeing Evan. One couple remembered hearing a brief whistle exchange. They assumed it was routine. The anglers packed up and left their spot. They did not know their quiet observation would be the last reliable sighting that day. What can remove a healthy adult from a narrow trail in minutes, without a sign left behind? The first call for help came late. At 3:18 p.m., Clackamas County Dispatch logged a missing adult on the Timberline Trail. The caller gave a precise point, near the Sandy River Bend, just east of the old washout. The leader confirmed the name. Evan McAllister, 22. Last seen minutes after 2:05 p.m. The group had searched for almost an hour without contact. They tried whistles. They tried the side spurs. No reply. Radio traffic pushed the file fast. Mounting conditions shift by the hour. Daylight would not last. Deputies paged Mount Hood search and rescue. A duty officer pulled the last coverage map for that corridor. The team set an initial search grid 2 kilometers by 1, centered on the bend. Rangers marked hazards. Undercut edges. Loose talus. Steep sections with brush that hides a person in seconds. A forecast update warned of cooling air and a thin fog bank after 5. They flagged hypothermia risk. Even in September, the canyon drains heat from anyone who sits still. At 3:42 p.m., 2 SAR units moved from the Timberline Lodge side. A third unit staged from the Zigzag Ranger Station. Volunteers gathered in the parking area as instructions went out. No self-deploying. Check-in. Get an assignment and a partner. Each pair would carry a whistle, a map copy, a radio, and a basic medical kit. AK-9 team arrived at 4:06 p.m. The handler took a sent article from Evan's daypack, which the group still had. The first tasking placed the dog along the bench where the anglers had watched a young man pass alone. The dog pulled north for a short stretch, then lost the line near scuffed gravel. The handler reset. Same result. Short pull. Then nothing. The team logged the points. They did not claim a direction of travel. In broken terrain, scent falls apart quickly. Crosswinds over warm rock carry it away. The record reflects those limits. It also shows how thin the clue set already was. At 4:28 p.m., command approved a helicopter recon from a civilian operator. The pilot took a quick fuel top-off at Troutdale and aimed for the canyon. The brief was simple. Low, slow passes above the river and the benches. Look for a living person. A seated figure. A reflection from a phone screen or a water bottle. At 5:01 p.m., the aircraft entered the valley and descended. A rotor wash kicked grit off a ledge. The pilot rose to clear a stand of timber, hit a gust, and chose to break off the pass. They landed at a safe turnoff to inspect the skids. No one was hurt. The decision held. They would orbit higher. Ground teams would handle the low angles. The incident commander set a hard timeline. Break search at civil dusk unless a live lead appeared. Reset and go again at first light. Team swept the river edge for signs of a slide or a splash. Nothing obvious. The anglers returned and gave statements. They confirmed the last visual. Gray shirt. Blue pants. Dark trail shoes. Alone. Calm. The anglers heard a short shout minutes later. They pointed to a general direction, not a precise line. At 5:19 p.m., a driver with the group found a weak signal on Highway 26 and called Daniel McAllister. He reached the ranger station at 6:07 p.m. He handed over a recent photo and a description of Evan's gear. 1-liter bottle. A folded map. A small first aid kit. No headlamp. No thermal layer beyond the fleece in his pack. Daniel answered every question. He did not make demands. He asked for facts. Where, when, and what was being done. A public information officer arrived to contain the rumor mill. Reporters were already calling. A volunteer from the Outdoor Fellowship offered to organize friends into search lines. The PIO said no. Uncontrolled lines break evidence and risk more losses. The team opened a controlled volunteer roster for morning. They kept the site secure. They set a media briefing for 7:30 p.m., just before they pulled teams off the trail. Around 6:40 p.m., a rumor hit the command tent. A man at a nearby trailhead claimed he saw Evan hitchhiking. Deputies checked. The man confused the date and the face. Another tip said someone heard a splash at 2:20. No name. No number. It went nowhere. A third caller insisted at Sear and knew the location. The PIO logged it and moved on. Noise comes with any search. It grows when the facts are thin. By 7:05 p.m., temperatures fell fast near the riverbed. Teams reported fog pooling under the benches. Radios cracked with short updates. Negative here. Negative there. A pair found a faint slide mark on a spur above the bend. It ended in brush. No fabric. No phone. AK-9 short pulled toward the same brush, then stalled. The team marked it and backed away to save the scene for daylight. The briefing at 7:30 p.m. was brief by design. Adult male missing since early afternoon. Multiple teams deployed. No confirmed evidence of injury. Search paused at dark. Full operation at dawn. The PIO took 2 questions and closed the line. Daniel stayed at the station. He asked for one thing only. A timeline on paper that showed every action and every minute. The chief handed him a copy. He kept it flat on the table, pen poised for any change. At 8:02 p.m., the final ground unit cleared the corridor. The forest went quiet. The logs ended for the night. If Evan was still close, he was beyond the reach of light and sound until morning. One variable remained unchecked, and it would change the geometry of the search at first light. At first light on September 29, 2002, teams re-entered the corridor. Temperatures were in the low 40s near the river. Visibility was limited by patchy fog under the benches. Command expanded the grid west and upslope. They added a tight sweep of the spur where the slide mark ended in brush. Nothing moved. No second mark. No fabric. No drop from a pocket. AK-19 restarted from the angler's position at 8:06 a.m. The dog pulled twice toward the same brush line, then stalled. The handler marked both points and requested a fresh article. Evan's fleece remained in his pack, which the group still held. The handler declined to use it in case Evan needed it if he had sheltered nearby. Deputies interviewed every member of the Outdoor Fellowship. They built a minute-by-minute timeline from 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. They compared notes against camera timestamps found on a disposable camera in a member's pocket. The images showed trail segments and faces. No shot included Evan after 1:37 p.m. A ranger cross-checked the times with sun angle tables to verify accuracy. Differences were small. The sequence held. At 9:22 a.m., a rope team cleared the talus above the bend in a slow traverse. They tested loose blocks and cavities that could hide a person. A climber called a halt at a shallow chute with shaded debris. He probed the gap and pulled out an old aluminum can. No clothing. No gear. No phone shine or reflective tape. They left the area intact and flagged the location for a forensic sweep. The sandy river showed no scouring along the inside curve that matched a recent fall. There were no fresh sweep marks on the exposed roots. No drag lines that would carry a person downslope. A swiftwater team entered at a safe point and worked eddies and strainers to the east. They found a hat, but it belonged to a hiker who lost it the day before. Negative again. The case file noted a pattern. The trail offered ordinary noise. It did not offer Evan. By noon, command requested cellular record checks. The carrier returned the final handshake at 1:52 p.m., consistent with the log. There were no outgoing calls or texts that day. Evan's last verified purchase was a fuel stop receipt from government camp at 9:11 a.m. The clerk remembered a grey shirt and a folded map tucked under an arm. Nothing suggested distress or confusion. On day 2, reporters arrived at Timberline Lodge. Rumors multiplied online. A caller claimed Evan left with a new friend in a red pickup. Highway cameras did not show such a truck at the needed time. Another caller swore they heard a second scream after 2:10 p.m. No other hiker supported that claim. A third caller insisted hikers from another state were involved. Deputies tracked them and interviewed all 4. They were in a different basin at 2:05 p.m., verified by photos and a lodge receipt. The PO's log on false leads grew by the hour. At 5:14 p.m., a volunteer twisted an ankle on the outer bench and needed a walkout assist. Command tightened safety margins and reduced night operations to perimeter watch. Daniel and Lauren remained at the station with a family liaison. They kept questions simple. Where was Evan last seen? What had been cleared? What would be cleared tomorrow? They avoided open speculation. They asked for maps, not promises. Day 3 focused on control points. Teams revisited junctions, game trails, and any spur that might look like the main path to a distracted hiker. They placed small markers at eye level to gauge lines of sight. They tested how far a call travels in that draw at different hours. Short distances were deceptive. A voice carried poorly against the river run. A whistle cut through, but not always. The record shows the limits and the steps taken to address them. By the end of 72 hours, the search shifted to limited and periodic. Command asked the Forest Service for seasonal support. In winter 2003, teams returned when leaves thinned and snow mapped the ground. They looked for human step patterns against animal tracks. They found none that matched Evan's size or shoe type. In spring 2004, low water allowed another sweep of pools and log jams. Negative. The grid grew, but not infinitely. Resources are finite. Evidence must lead the way. Evidence did not. Daniel took a practical role. He built a one-page timeline for public use and posted it at trailheads with permission. He requested photos from anyone who hiked the corridor on September 28. Some arrived. None contained Evan beyond 1:37 p.m. He called for controlled volunteer days, supervised by SAR. He avoided amateur solo searches. He tracked every new tip in a spiral notebook. He crossed out the bad ones with a single line. He left the dates visible. Fatigue set in around the case. Tips slowed. Patrols continued at reduced scale. Periodic rechecks hit the same problem. The ground did not talk. Yet one change was scheduled by the county. In late summer 2006, 2 surveyors would take a high line above the canyon to mark a revised boundary, and their route would pass a slope no team had favored before. August 12, 2006, 10:14 a.m., Mount Hood National Forest. 2 county surveyors walked a high traverse above the Sandy River Canyon. Their assignment was routine. Verify boundary markers and flag a proposed line. The route ran across a talus slope that most hikers avoid. The angle is steep. The rock is loose. No public trail crosses it. The surveyors moved slow, checked footing, and called out distances. One paused at a shallow shelf below a snag. He saw fabric where there should be none. They halted and photographed the scene wide. They did not touch anything. They marked the GPS point and called it in. Deputies reached the shelf at 12:03 p.m. A forensic tech and a ranger arrived minutes later. The location sat roughly 470 vertical feet above the timberline corridor. There was no simple line in or out. The shelf held a compact cluster. A brown fleece lay sun-faded on one side. Blue trekking pants were there, turned inside out. A pair of dark trail runners sat close together. The sole showed moderate wear but no tearing. The laces were intact. A shallow scatter of small bones sat near the fabric. A ranger noted a tooth and a curved piece of cranial bone. There was no obvious blood staining on the outer clothing surfaces. No large animal scat within several yards. No drag marks leading in. No sign of a shelter or a bivvy. The talus above the shelf looked undisturbed. Deputies expanded the perimeter and limited foot traffic to a narrow approach line. A fixed line went in for safety. Every step was logged. Crime lab personnel collected the clothing and bones with standard protocols. Paper bags. Separate containers. Labels fixed on site. The shoes went into boxes after internal photographs. Each item got a position sketch with distances to fixed points. The fleece showed wear at the cuffs and collar. The pants had dirt on the inner surface consistent with inversion. The waistband had no broken stitching. The pockets were empty. No phone. No ID. No keys. No wallet. The medical examiner reviewed the cranial fragment and the tooth. A preliminary assessment said the remains could belong to a young adult male. The scene yield was small. The slope and the exposure likely reduced the sample over time. The team screened cracks in the rock with small brushes and a vacuum. A few more bone fragments were recovered. No single piece showed clear bite or chew marks. That finding stayed cautious. Weathering and breakage can mask such features after years. DNA testing began as soon as the chain of custody allowed. A reference sample from Daniel McAllister was already on file with consent. The lab reported a strong match later that fall. The remains belonged to Evan. There was no argument in the numbers. The family received the confirmation privately. No cause of death was assigned. The sample was not sufficient to state trauma. No weapon was found. No rope. No metal buckles broken free of fabric. The report avoided projection. It set limits and stuck to them. Forensics examined the clothing under magnification. They noted light abrasion on elbow areas and along one knee panel. They also noted uneven ultraviolet aging. The fleece showed more sun fade than the pants. That could mean different exposure spans. It could also mean different fabric treatments. The lab did not speculate beyond those points. Soil collected from inside the inverted pants did not match the top layer on the shelf. It matched a lower layer in the same slope profile. That hinted at movement. It did not prove how or when. The geometry raised the hardest question. How does a person reach a shelf 470 feet above the corridor with no recorded climb or fall line? There was no continuous slide path that ended at the cluster. There was no debris fan consistent with a long tumble. A strong climber could gain the height using a zigzag across stable bands. Evan carried no rope. He did not carry a helmet. The shelf offers little cover. Search teams had scanned the slope visually in 2002. They did not put people on that angle due to risk. The choice made sense then. It complicates the record now. Deputies traced every hiker and worker who used that quadrant in the previous weeks. The list was short. Fire crews had not crossed the band. Trail crews were working east that season. The two surveyors had no connection to the case. Their GPS tracks aligned with the photos and the call timeline. The anglers from 2002 were re-interviewed by phone. Their account did not change. Calm walker. Grey shirt. Blue pants. A short shout minutes later. No more. The discovery did not close the file. It reset it. The scene validated the loss but raised conflicts. Inside-out pants. Shoes placed, not scattered. Clothing with fewer tears than expected after 4 years. Bones close to gear rather than below it. These details are factual. They do not agree on a single story. The county kept the case open and evidence-driven. The family made no public accusations. Daniel asked for one thing. Recheck the slope bands within the same elevation range to look for a primary site. Teams did as asked that fall before winter conditions returned. They found nothing else tied to Evan. The shelf remained an island of facts with no bridge back to the trail. One observation on a lab note became the new focus for debate. Investigators moved from recovery to explanation. They laid out the simplest path first. Evan slipped and fell. The slope was steep. The bench was narrow. A short tumble could be fatal. The shelf sat 470 feet above the corridor. But the shelf told a different story. There was no debris fan. There was no continuous slide path. Loose rock looked undisturbed above the cluster. Clothing was not torn as a long fall would predict. Shoes were near each other, not scattered by impact. The fall model kept breaking. Wildlife was next. Cougar or black bear activity can move remains. Predators tear fabric and drag prey downhill or into cover. They leave sign. The shelf had no clear bite scoring on recovered bone. The clothing lacked rips along high-tension points. The shoes showed dust and typical abrasion, not crushing or tooth marks. Scat was absent within a practical sweep radius. A ranger reminded the team that years of weather can erase edges. The medical examiner agreed but stayed cautious. Even with that caveat, the scene did not look like a predation cache. Could water have lifted clothing and bones upslope from below? The physics were poor. The shelf sits above the river channel with no chute leading in. Flood debris was not trapped there. Branches around the cluster carried no silt line. Hydrology notes pointed the other way. The river takes down. It does not lift uphill to a high ledge. Human movement remained on the table. Someone could have relocated clothing and partial remains. That theory fits the shelf height and the clustered pattern. It explains shoes together and a fleece with more sun fade than the pants. It matches soil inside the inverted pants that did not match the top layer on the shelf. The pushback was practical. The slope is exposed. The approach is risky. Moving anything there without leaving a track would be difficult. There were no new prints, no rope fibers, and no gear fragments that did not belong. A small lab note created debate. Ultraviolet aging on the fleece was greater than on the pants. The difference exceeded what fabric composition alone would predict. That can mean unequal time in direct light. The pants were inverted, with dust and fine gravel inside the legs. Soil analysis placed the dust layer below the surface sheet on the shelf. The combination suggested the pants had been stored or shielded for part of the period, then exposed closer to the time of discovery. The lab stopped short of a timeline. The math was uncertain. The question did not go away. Footway position drew new focus. The laces were tied. The tongues were even. The insoles were clean relative to the outer soles. One heel carried a thin smear of a clear tacky resin. The botany consult identified it as likely from lodgepole pine or Douglas fir sap. Both grow on the slope, but sap appears when a foot brushes a fresh wound or a limb cut. Trail crews were not there that season. A human could step in sap while climbing. A removed shoe could pick it up if placed on a sticky patch. The record could not choose between those paths. The inside-out pants remained the most resistant detail. People do sometimes pull pants off inverted in panic or due to cold stress. In that case, fabric snags and threads pull at the cuffs. The cuffs here were intact. Waistband stitching was intact. The pockets were empty. A forensic tech raised a narrow scenario. Pants inverted during removal by another person, then placed. It lines up with the soil mismatch. It does not explain the lack of transfer from hands or gloves. No prints were recoverable after 4 years in the open. The point stayed grey. Digital traces were rechecked. Evan's disposable camera had 3 trail shots up to 1:37 p.m. None faced the slope where the shelf sits. The card from another hiker's point-and-shoot showed a blurred figure on a bend at 1:58 p.m. The jacket color did not match Evan's. A lodge receipt cleared that hiker's party to another basin by 2:20 p.m. Highway cameras from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. showed no truck or car tied to Evan leaving the area. The red pickup rumor failed again. A gear audit found one more small point. A torn corner of a space blanket wrapper was recovered 26 yards downslope. It was sun-cracked and brittle. The stamped lock code did not match Ranger Station first aid stock that year. Daniel confirmed Evan carried no space blanket that day. The wrapper may belong to another hiker, but it put human trash within view of the shelf. That matters when considering placement by a person. The accident model could not explain the cluster. The animal model could not bridge the clothing condition. The water model failed the slope. The human movement model fit parts and failed others. That is where the case sits. Patterns without a single line. Family kept their request narrow. Recheck elevations near the shelf for a primary scene. The county did, with negative results. Investigators added one last test. Pollen and spore analysis from fabric seams might place exposure windows across seasons. The samples were small. The method is slow. Results would not promise a clock. They might still suggest a sequence. If the fleece saw more summers than the pants, the shelf was not the only stage. If they age together, the case shifts back toward a single event. When the lab called back, the answer did not reduce questions. It multiplied them. The lab's palynology report arrived in late winter. The samples were small and fragile. Analysts found a mix of pine and fir pollen embedded in seam threads. They also found spores consistent with late summer growths at that elevation. The distribution was uneven between the fleece and the pants. The fleece showed accumulation across for warm seasons. The pants showed a lighter curve, closer to 2. The finding did not assign dates. It pointed to different exposure windows. It supported, but did not prove, that the clothing was not exposed together for the entire 4-year gap. Investigators presented the results to Daniel and Lauren in a quiet meeting room at the ranger station. The medical examiner repeated the limits. No cause of death. No evidence of homicide. No evidence of a fall that could be measured. No sign of predation that survived time. The sheriff's office kept the classification open. Missing person. Partial remains recovered. Undetermined manner. The stance protected options and avoided claims the evidence could not carry. Policy work followed the science. The Forest Service updated the corridor plan for Mount Hood. Groups that change routes midday must log the decision at a ranger point or by a dedicated phone line. A call log records time and route. Search teams get quicker leads when timelines are clean. A county training day added a case module. The module uses Evan's file to teach search grid drift and decision points under media pressure. There is no drama in that training. There are steps, forms, and maps. Those steps save time when minutes decide outcomes. Families of missing adults often face the same problem. Public attention spikes, then fades. Daniel moved with purpose inside those cycles. He pushed for controlled volunteer days when ground allowed it. He kept his public statements short. He avoided blame and rumors. He asked for specific help. Old photos from September 28, 2002. GoPro or point-and-shoot uploads timestamped near the river junction. 2 photos arrived months apart that year. Neither changed the file. Both confirmed how many eyes saw nothing. In 2007, an unknown caller began to harass Daniel. The man claimed to be Evan and demanded money to come home. Deputies traced the calls to a prepaid device and arrested a suspect for harassment and fraud. The case was not tied to the trail. There was no sign the suspect had ever been near Mount Hood. A court issued a restraining order and a fine. Daniel kept his phone number anyway. He understood the risk. He also knew that real tips sometimes arrive through messy channels. The county followed one more angle. A small smear of tacky resin on one heel troubled the team. They requested maintenance logs for nearby corridors. No tree work was logged on the slope where the shelf sits. A timber crew had cut limbs 2 miles west in late summer 2006. That did not explain the resin on a shoe placed on that specific shelf. It left the same fork. Climbing contact or placement contact. Each path remained unconfirmed. A second K9 review used historical scent articles from Evans' living space that the family had preserved. The handler work documented corridors and lay-down zones near the benches. After so many years, a negative run proved nothing. The handler logged a brief interest at a switchback above the bend. The wind was shifting. The scent record here had always been fragile. Command marked the point and moved on. Daniel compiled his notes into a short book in 2008. The pages are thin and factual. He lists times, places, names, and steps. He avoids interpretations. The final chapter includes his recommendations. Do not split groups without a hard plan. Log route changes. Carry a headlamp even on day hikes in September. Leave a cold weather layer in your pack. These are basic points. They survive trends and gear cycles. They are boring. They save lives. The file shows periodic activity through the next years. Trail reroutes shifted foot traffic. High snow years delayed seasonal checks. Fire seasons closed parts of the forest. The shelf remained the same. A fixed set of coordinates with no bridge back to a primary site. When new staff rotated into the unit, a supervisor made them read the file. New eyes sometimes see a pattern old eyes miss. No pattern emerged that could live on paper. By 2014, the case was a cold line item with an open tag. The sheriff's office kept a designated contact for the family. The lab boxes stayed sealed, except for limited re-examination. The evidence log shows careful hands, not dramatic turns. The truth may not be dramatic. It sits in gaps between dates and heights. Lauren married and moved north. She visits the ranger station when she is in Oregon. She asks for the timeline. She knows it by heart. She asks still. Daniel keeps a copy in his desk and on his wall. He agreed to one change on the final page. A quiet ask for anyone who hiked that shelf line between August 1st and August 12th, 2006, to call in, even if they think they saw nothing. No one called with the missing link. The questions remain clear and narrow. How did Evan reach a shelf 470 feet above the corridor? Why were the pants inverted? Why did the fleece and pants age differently? Those facts stand without extra words. They point in more than one direction. Someone may know why they point that way. Someone may have walked above the canyon on a day that felt ordinary and noticed fabric on stone. If that person calls, the record will finally move.